air-based commercialization. Will the Chord group people, Chris Narborough and Steve Watson, please come to the head table? Chord group. They were here earlier. All right, there's Steve. Where's Chris? Okay, come on up to the head table. Also, turns out that Kabir Haqjo had to get on a plane this morning, so he went back to Afghanistan. That's our Afghanistan Investment Support Agency president. So he's not here. So I have asked a friend and colleague over the years to sit in for him, and that will be Steve Appleton. Steve, many of you know him in the construction industry. He built several very significant construction companies. Steve was a military guy. He fought with Canadian Special Forces in the early years in Afghanistan, fought also with U.S. Special Forces in Afghanistan. Appleton has done some amazing things. Appleton was behind is behind really the feasibility study extending the railroad from Hayreton to Tajikistan. And they're working with Canarail on that project. I have understood that Atiqullah Nusrat, our wonderful CEO of ACCI, Afghan Chamber of Commerce and Industries, had a special request to go over to the Department of Commerce and deal with a large project on dispute resolution. So he's not here. So sitting in for him will be his trusted Deputy CEO, Kadir Bahman, Deputy CEO of the Afghan Chamber of Commerce and Industries. I'm not going to say anything about the Chord group, but just a point on air-based commercialization. This is moving deliberately forward. There are a lot of major issues at stake. So we're going to basically talk about some potential that can come out of this. I think the Chord group are best advised as to how much information can be let out at this point. But make no mistake about it. These multi-billion-dollar air base installations, starting with Kandahar and Herat and Balkh, these are incredible resources that could be used for commercial purposes. So with that, I will leave the speaking responsibility first to Chris. Chris Narborough is General Counsel. Is Tom Muenzberg here? I didn't see him. Oh, there he is. Okay, Tom, yeah. Tom, as you know, is the Executive Director of AmCham, the American Chamber of Commerce in Afghanistan, and he and Walter Koenig, his colleague at the time when they were with the Department of Commerce in the U.S. Embassy, are on the U.S. side, we're coordinators and to some extent architects of this base commercialization initiative. So I don't know if we have 10 cards for everybody, but if not, that won't hurt. So Chris, would you like to begin the discussion?
I'm new to advising Chord on the Afghan project, but Jason has recently delivered to the Afghan government a lengthy business plan for the proposed special economic zones. Unfortunately, there are government-imposed strict limitations on what I can say, limitations on how I can respond to questions, and real limitations on what I know too, but I shall try to my best to be helpful. What I can speak about is a case study of a special economic zone in the Cayman Islands that Mr. Blick and I created with others, based to a large extent on Jason's prior dealings with the hugely successful Mideast special economic zones, primarily in Dubai. It appears that the Afghan people could really use a massive introduction of new business opportunities from companies making direct foreign investment into new special economic zone businesses. But what is a special economic zone? It can be many things. At its simplest, it can be a free zone for the transshipment of goods, or it can be a collection of business parks with special privileges and speedy efficient setup for new businesses, free from restrictive practices, zones of efficiency and progress. All disincentives to business have to be lifted or eradicated completely. If not, business will not come. The current plan is to facilitate and promote knowledge-based industries, research and development projects, technology, health and science projects, business services, education, and more, depending on the individual base. SEZs are typically prevented from competing with certain types of existing business, but SEZs must have certain special privileges and incentives to flourish. Lots of factors will come into play to determine the final look of each separate special economic zone. SEZs, or a series of SEZs, can completely alter the game. In fact, it's not so much a game changer, but for an SEZ to work, it has to be and become an entirely new game. A quick case study. Grand Cayman is a tiny island near Cuba, only 25 miles long, which in about 20 years went from international obscurity to becoming the 5th largest banking center in the world and the hedge fund capital of the world. How did that happen, and what actually happened, and what do special economic zones have to do with this? While I speak about Cayman, I want you to imagine the bases, each one being some sort of approximate equivalent in size to the populated areas of Grand Cayman. The Cayman SEZ is Cayman Enterprise City. It had nothing to do with the financial services success of Cayman, but it is diversifying the product set away from simply tourism and financial services. It's creating an entirely new economy, an entirely new town or city, or one that will sustain Cayman into the future. I hear about rural Afghanistan. Well, Cayman moved from a fishing village economy in the 1950s with a population of about 4,000 people. Cayman had only one bank in 1952 and 2 in 1960. After introduction of a Banks and Trust Companies law, a financial services sector began to grow from nothing, without any appreciable government funding at that time, without any international aid. In a very short time, new businesses and industries can grow in leaps and bounds, even on a tiny island in the middle of nowhere, and without donors, without any appreciable aid or loans. Simply some good people open to new ideas and foreign investment and open to foreigners. There's 100+ nationalities in tiny Grand Cayman. We no longer have a few thousand people, we have about 60,000, and thousands of them are lawyers, accountants, bankers, and other financial services workers. Most are engaged in servicing clients from around the world, clients who choose to use Cayman as their financial services center. Rapid economic growth is possible anywhere. That's my message. But, and this is important, all restrictive practices and obstacles to business need to be removed for business to flourish in the zones. As the zones flourish, the communities around them will flourish too, and they will work hand in hand. Those residential and business parks have to provide the whole experience for business people to move from their comfortable home communities to new homes. They have to be an attractive place for living and doing business. I'm told that the Afghan government is moving forward deliberately and with a high level of support for the SEZ proposals. Chord and government will be working on a definitive agreement, SEZ laws and regulations, and practical matters relating to the potential transference to the SEZs of certain yet to be determined coalition vacated premises within the air bases. In conclusion, Chord believes that the special economic zones can become the economic, social, and strategic pressure valve, and one that the greater community can leverage for jobs in and outside the zones, improving the economy as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. And I'm actually supposed to be sitting next to Chris, our attorney. So in case I say something, he can kick me and say, "Don't say that," because right now we are under government, oversight of saying what we can and can't say, and we have to be very cautious. If we imagine, with these zones and their air bases, we have so many interests and so many players and so many stakeholders in this project that we really have to have everything aligned in perfect synergy before we really announce. And of course, there are some certain things has been out in the press, has been announced. It was a Dubai conference that we were there. There are 8 identified air bases that as a coalition forces would draw down that we intend to help stimulate the economy by turning parts of those air bases into economic zones. Those zones will, as Chris said, have certain concessions. These concessions would be granted to companies that have been approved by a zone committee that are allowed to do business within the zone that would not compete against local businesses outside the zone. So what it does, it creates an environment where, one, you're creating jobs both in the zone and outside the zone. So in most of our impact analysis, we see that every job that's created within the zone creates anywhere from 8 to 15 jobs outside the zone. So, excuse me, in the zone, the more jobs we create, the more that happens in the local economy, because everybody needs something that's in the zone. They need their accountants, they need lawyers, they need, as Jason would say, they need apples and grapes and food and housekeepers and all the things necessary to support and sustain their lifestyle within the zone. So the zone becomes a really interesting catalyst for growth, both on an individual zone level and within the community as a whole. Now, if you don't mind, let me just take one step backwards and tell you a little bit what happened with Jason, because it really is. He is an amazing guy, and only if you know Jason that he would actually do this. He was going skiing in Vail, and I get a call, and he's like, oh, no, he broke something, typical what you would do when you go skiing. But no, Jason, I get a call from a friend of his saying, he actually heard commotion outside of his room. He opens his door. He sees this guy beating up a woman. He's in his jockey shorts. He goes out, tries to help the woman, and the guy basically beats him over the head and strangles him to death. And he was actually dead for 4 minutes and then brought into a coma for 4 days, an induced coma. But now he actually is out. So for everybody who knows Jason, he's doing just fine. And now he actually has a legitimate excuse for things that he can't remember. So now every time I tell him something, he'll just use that as an excuse, like I don't remember. So he is doing fine, and he is actually a very important driver on this project. So going back to the elements of the zone, it really is important that we understand that there's a lot of incredible assets, whether they're power plants and sewage treatment, bottled watering facilities, and roads, and everything necessary to build what you would consider industrial park already there. So we can now use some of the resources that we, when looking at other zones around the world, would put into the infrastructure, laying the piping, laying the conduit, bringing electric to the zone. We don't need to do that in these. We just have to properly utilize them with the right businesses that can help stimulate the economy in a knowledge-based way. So we're only talking about knowledge-based industries. We're not talking about making, production line widgets. We're talking about aerospace. We're talking about health and sciences. We're talking about extraction. We're talking about energy. We're talking about those industries that can really use the assets and the available resources of Afghanistan, from its human resource talent to its natural resources, in a way that would really help the country as a whole. So that is our goal. That's our mandate. We've had 2 very good meetings with President Ghani, and we are really looking forward to really helping this country get past this hump and using the bases as a way for security and stimulation of that local economy.
Hello, I'm Thomas Muenzberg, Executive Director for the American Chamber of Commerce. And as Don mentioned, myself and colleague Walt Koenig, when we were with Department of Commerce in Afghanistan, initiated the base transition process with the U.S. military and worked hand in hand with them to get things started and off the ground. Just as with a little bit of background, Walt and I also did a base transition in Iraq. We transitioned a forward operating base by the Port of Qasr in southern Iraq and turned that into a development project. We were working for Department of State at the time. And so that was a successful project in and of itself, and had many of the same components that that we're seeing today with these bases. And you know, just as an overview, in terms of base transition, you know, I think my job here is to talk about what the background and the opportunity might be, you know, from an asset base and that sort of thing. You know, there are 8 bases. There's billions of dollars worth of assets involved in these bases, as you know, as was mentioned, and these bases are an integral part of the trade routes in Afghanistan. Most of them are, well, they're all connected in one way or another to the ring route or the ring road that goes all around Afghanistan, and the trade and commerce has flowed in and out of these bases for the last 15 years. So they're established, and they're capable of handling heavy and light industrial. They're capable of becoming man camps. This is what they have been doing. It's been fuel storage, cold storage. There's power, tons of power on these bases. I mean, I think Kandahar has more power on base than the Kajiki Dam is providing. So, you know, it is a massive power resource. You could generate power and, you know, and light the city if that was a business case that made sense. So, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity, and in terms of getting involved in these assets and moving forward in a you know, with your own business case. You have to get creative about how that's going to look, and what those activities might be. But they're available, and the commitment from the government of Afghanistan has been remarkable, I would say. You know, they've moved forward in a way that is uncharacteristic of the Afghan government in the past, and I think that's an excellent indication of the success or potential success of the project. I know the U.S. military stands behind it in a very strong way. They're very interested in transitioning. One of the questions that might come up is, you know, the troop levels are going to stay relatively the same. Coalition forces probably will stay relatively the same. So does that stop base transition? You know, I mean, in my opinion, it doesn't stop base transition at all. In fact, I think what it does is it gives a little more certainty to the project, because you've got security and stability that will remain in place for years to come, and you also have you know, a dedicated military organization, U.S. military that is keenly aware of the potential threats to these bases and wants to ensure that they are responsibly transitioned. You know, just in general, one of the really key aspects of this is if you just allow these bases to be shuttered and you walk away, if you mothball the bases, then you know, there are elements within Afghanistan that would go in and loot the bases, take over the bases. We've seen this happen in the South already. Yeah, with the smaller ones, and you know, these are bad optics for the government of Afghanistan, bad optics for the U.S. military. Yeah, and dangerous. Yeah, I mean, you turn a you know, a former military base into militia headquarters, and you've got, you know, a situation that you know that now needs to be undone. So when you bring in a private sector entity, you're bringing in a group, whether it's you know, a large international investment group or a logistics anchor or some sort of industrial operation, combining that with special economic zones. What you do is you create a third-party interest in these bases that will protect it, right? If you've got a multi-million-dollar interest in one of these airstrips, you're going to protect that interest. You'll have security and relationships both nationally and regionally that you and your corporate staff will maintain, and that's really critical. And that is an element of transition from, you know, government market economy to a private market economy, and an interest that exists in Afghanistan but needs to be, you know, it needs to flourish. And that that in general, I think that's the real key to the stability of these bases going forward, is that you'll have a third-party interest, a public sector interest that will maintain the bases, or a section of the base, and then create some prosperity and some regional and national interest in ensuring that they go forward in a positive way. I guess, just to kind of wrap it up, my thought, in terms of what this looks like, if you include special economic zones, you bring in large anchors, and then you involve regional and local businesses, then you have several tiers of investment, several tiers of interest that will provide that kind of ongoing stability and that kind of prosperity, creates jobs, as we're heard in the recent keynote. Jobs are extremely important, and that's going to be a massive indication of future success for Afghanistan. So it's going to take some time, and it's a excellent endeavor, and I hope everybody has an incredible amount of success with it, and the American Chamber is going to do what it can to support that as well. So thank you very much.
So let me approach this from first impressions. I've read some of the public documentation on it, which is not much. But as a business person like yourselves, who's been operating and doing business in Afghanistan for about 10 years, any new initiative, as Mr. Azimi alluded to, with regards to moving forward is welcome. And there needs to be an open-mindedness associated with it. That being said, I think we all need to be cautious with regards to modeling from past experiences in other countries as superimposing them on Afghanistan. I say that both from a kinetic and non-kinetic aspect with regards to our experiences in Iraq, which we then brought to Afghanistan, and we had shortfalls, significant ones. And the same thing with regards to case studying economic experiences. Cayman Islands, Dubai is not representational of the situation in Afghanistan. That being said, that's common knowledge. One of the things that would come to mind is, though, using the location of the military bases. I certainly agree with the premise that the alternative of mothballing them is not acceptable. Therefore, what is one of the alternative methodologies? It may be this zone, and welcome that with regards to its fruition and its more manifest understanding. But the military bases are just that, they're military bases, and as such are targets, and have, over the course of time, as there is a war going on, been targeted and have a history with regards to conflicts surrounding them. That, therefore, requires an assumption of security. The assumption of security can't be understated with regards to making the special economic zone successful. And how that security is put in place, whether it is a third party that's from the private sector, whether it is from coalition forces, or whether it is from Afghan forces, will be a key driver with regards to any decision for investment. And that needs to be well understood and contractually embedded before groups are going to come in there with the hope of making a return on their investment. The lease arrangements, I understand, are long. And when you're looking at lease arrangements of 25 to 30 years, there need to be certain negotiations and terms and conditions that would allow you to end such a contract for things like acts of war, with the political risk, because that transcends political governments with regards to lease arrangements for that long, and they would then need to be able to transcend changes in governments. Another factor for a business person to consider. I take note of the creation of two business environments, and so we think of this as business people. A special business environment within a locale, and then an outside different business environment for those not in the special economic zone. I'm sure that can be overcome, but I put forward to you that the communication strategy and the engagement into the communities and those that are affected or living beside such two distinct business environments needs to be exhaustive.
with the understanding that there are benefits to come from having a different business environment surrounding your business environment. And that the two aren't in competition but are complementary. And this would be something that would have to be very carefully articulated, particularly in the rural communities where there may be a misperception of what is actually going on a base. And lastly, my point would be, we heard from Mr. Azimi, we've heard from others, and that is the respect for the rule of law and governance. An arrangement like this, with what it implies, would need absolute certainty with regards to the government respecting the conditions that are put onto these special economic zones. Because the potential is huge for that to be corrupted or to be made dysfunctional. All right, well, on 10 minutes notice, that's the best that I can offer as a first impression, so thank you very much.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Good morning, dear friends, to all of you. Actually, majority of the issues are covered by our panelists and friends. As Don mentioned that my CEO was supposed to be here and to deliver a presentation. But anyway, I just went through the document and read some of the issues, and which is reflected to the proposal of Chord group. As I see, majority of Afghan people which are sitting here, they are looking for opportunities in Afghanistan. Any business opportunities are welcomed by Afghan community, and they are just waiting for the government support and for the security issues to be solved. As I see this is a very, we are very positive in this initiative, in this proposal and project, and it will have a very huge contribution to the GDP of Afghanistan for the future. I highlighted some of the opportunities which exist with regards to these special economic zones. For example, majority of the big companies in Afghanistan exist in these selected areas. So that is somehow an opportunity that invite them to expand their business, to expand their investment, and create job in Afghanistan. Transfer of technology and knowledge. So that's also a very big opportunity in Afghanistan. We have good examples in Afghanistan, which there was some contracting or some joint businesses between Afghanistan and American businesses. Nowadays, they are well functioning in Afghanistan, and they are doing very well with regard to their activities. New businesses are will be growing if this special economic zone established in Afghanistan. So that will be another opportunity for Afghanistan. As our friends mentioned, that Afghanistan is going to be going to get or access to the WTO membership as soon as possible. So this is also a good opportunity for Afghanistan, because when we go to WTO membership, so we need some concrete plan for our industry, for attracting new investment in Afghanistan. So this will be this initiative in special economic zone can be one of the best plan for this WTO accession in Afghanistan. So I'm very positive for this. As we know that there are a lot of Afghan companies, they are willing to invest in Afghanistan. Billions of US dollars they have, they're invested in Dubai and other countries. So if we somehow succeed to establish these economic zones, we will attract them to come to Afghanistan, to invest in Afghanistan, and to create jobs, to produce and to export to other countries. So this is a huge opportunities and big opportunities. last but not least, we should change the current economic situation of Afghanistan. We should replace the trade with aid. So somehow we need the natural and the real economy in Afghanistan. So this is also very good for our future. There are some challenges ahead of this process. One of the issues that I see, unfortunately, the business community of Afghanistan, especially the AACC as a representative of the business community, we are not involved in this process. So somehow we request from the different organization or involved organization to involve all these stakeholders in Afghanistan for the initial planning phase. So that will strong their plan, that will somehow support the process for the future. And another challenge is that availability of reliable and continued energy is a very challenge for this process, because producing and availability of energy is somehow a challenge and a problem in Afghanistan for the moment, and it needs a huge investment in Afghanistan. So somehow we should also have a plan for this. As our friend mentions, security. This is the most important issue and problem of Afghanistan for the moment, which everybody is suffering from that. I hope that you will have a plan for this. Thank you very much. John.
Great.